Hi, welcome back to another episode of Nobody's Doing It Right, the podcast for those who are uncertain. My name is Kat, I am your host. For today's episode, we're going to talk about how you aren't the person you once were. And this is with regards to shame and regrets you have about decisions you made in the past and how you look back and you're really embarrassed, you're shameful for them, you maybe hate yourself for them, you're mean to yourself now because of them. This is something that I struggle with. I'm sure so many of us do. And especially for those of us I find who are people pleasers and who are perfectionists, it really hits us harder than most people. But of course, I'm sure many people who maybe don't relate to being a people pleaser or perfectionist can also experience this. But I find that those of us who tend to be those things, we ruminate a lot. Like rumination is our way to feel like we have some semblance of control over the things that we can't control. So this is something that I've struggled with. I've had to work on a lot in therapy. I've had to work on it a lot on my own and find ways that work best for me to manage it. And the thing that I've had to really do for myself, first of all, journaling. I always recommend journaling to really sit with your thoughts, explore them, being honest with yourself about these things, but also reminding yourself that you aren't who you once were. I think sometimes we can forget that our past selves are not necessarily our present selves. We sometimes bring those past identities with us into the present, and that makes it harder to recognize what parts of us have changed, what parts of us have grown, what parts of us we've shed throughout the years, because that is part of the process of life, right? If we attach too much to an identity of who we are, if we attach too much to being like, oh, that's me, this is who I am, we look at these things we've done that we don't like, we don't relate to anymore, we regret doing, we feel bad for doing them, we assume that because I did it then, it must be who I am now. And it's like, you're not. You're different now. You might still feel the same, you look the same, you're in the same body, but you're not the same. Like, things have changed. And you will always continue to change. So it's important to really make yourself aware of the parts of you that have changed, to recognize that growth. That's also why I love journaling, because you can really look back at who you were a couple of years ago in the pages of your journal and really recognize, like, wow, I actually have changed a lot. It gives you a place to really reflect and, just a place to recognize the change in a tangible way, right? Because we might lose sight of it without having something visual to look back on, right? We can see the way we changed physically. That's easy to spot, right? When we look back at younger pictures of us. But what about mentally and emotionally? It's hard to spot that, right? So journaling is a great place to start with that. But reminding yourself that you are not who you once were. So you are a human being who has to learn how to exist as a human being. You're not born knowing how to function, how to exist. That's unrealistic. However, I do think societally, culturally at times, there is this pressure for us to be like that. Maybe from parents who also didn't have the level of awareness needed to teach us or help us understand that we are growing, we're learning. We might feel like that. We might feel like we should have it all figured out, especially when we have this narrative of, like, by 20, you're an adult now, so you have to have it all figured out. You have to know exactly how to function, how to show up, how to perform, how to be around people. Like, of course, you won't know how to do that properly. You're still young and you're still learning. And also, I think the entire point of life is to continue learning and understanding how to exist as a human being. But especially when you're younger, especially, years ago when you were still understanding yourself. But I don't think it really ever stops. So I'm not saying that this is only for people who made mistakes when they were younger. You could be 35 and have made a mistake, and you're 40 now and looking back on it and being like, oh, I really regret that, but I should have known better. It's like, how can you know until you know? Right? Like, you need to actually experience these things that you don't like in order to understand that that's not who you are. That's not what you want to do again. Or maybe you related to it back then. Maybe it was who you were back then. But now, as you've shifted and changed, you look back at that version of yourself and you're like, oh my God, I don't even recognize myself. Yeah, that's good. That's a good thing, actually. And I know it's painful. It's uncomfortable. You regret things you did. You feel bad that you made someone feel a certain way. All of that is valid. It's important to hold yourself accountable. If you feel like you want to give apologies to people, do that. I do that all the time. I think it's really important if you genuinely feel that way, just for your own self to even release some of that shame and guilt. But allowing yourself to understand that you were learning how to exist as a human. You're still learning how to exist as a human. So I really hate when we say, well, they should have known. You should always know. And it's like, yeah, sure. Some things you should understand, but everybody's timing is different. Everybody's experiences are different. Their upbringings are all different. everybody learns things in their own way, right? And some people might never learn what you've learned, so you don't align with them in that way, and that's fine too. But be kinder to yourself as you continue to progress through life and exist as a human being who is fallible and flawed and messy and stupid sometimes and makes mistakes, because you will. You will constantly do that. So if you're holding tightly onto this past regret you have and this mistake you made and you hate yourself for it and you're so angry, what are you going to feel like when you make another one? Because you will. You will inevitably make another one. Hopefully you can try to mitigate those mistakes. The more you learn about what you like and don't like, you hopefully do it less and less, right? Again, hold yourself accountable. You make the changes you need to, sure. But you're still going to make those mistakes. You're still going to show up in ways that aren't properly aligned with who you want to be. It's going to happen. There's no way to avoid it. And I say this as someone who's been on this kind of personal growth journey for years. And I've learned so many things, and I've changed in so many ways emotionally with the way I show up with people, the way I behave. And yet, I still slip back into old patterns and habits. And that's part of the process. There's no way to avoid that. It's going to happen. Not always, and less as you move through your journey and you make sure you're recognizing these things. But it's going to happen. So now I'm trying my best to understand that, okay, if it's going to happen, I'm always going to make mistakes because I'm still learning what it's like to exist. Now I'm 32. I don't know what it's like to exist as a 32-year-old. I'm learning it, And when I look back when I'm 35, I'm really like, oh yeah, I know how to exist as a 32-year-old, but now I don't know how to exist as a 35-year-old. I'm learning. So it really is just a process of learning how to exist. So now what I do is I try to be really kind to myself and thank my past self for doing whatever it is they did, whatever I hate and I'm shameful of and I regret. I thank them simply because they showed me exactly how I don't want to be anymore, or the person I was but have changed into now and have grown and improved. I thank them because they did the best they could with what they had back then, with the knowledge they had, the emotional intelligence they had, with whatever trauma they had. They did the best with what they could, and they made mistakes and they did things that now your current self is shameful of. And it is what it is. They did that because they didn't know any better. And that's what happens in life. You don't know until you know. And it really is a shame to make yourself feel so shameful for it, especially something you did when maybe you were at a time when you were traumatized, or at a time when things were not going well for you, or just when you were younger and you didn't know any better, or the people in your life around you acted this way, so you thought that's how you should act. It is a shame to make yourself feel so bad for that, to hate yourself for it. Because you're not that person anymore. You are always inevitably changing, even if it doesn't feel that way sometimes. So remind yourself, take note of the things that have changed about you as a person so that you can show yourself, see, I'm not that person anymore. And also, your behaviors and actions are not necessarily your identity or who you are. They're things you've done. And of course, the things we do reflect on us and our characters, totally. But it's also about the things you understand, recognize, and change. The things you've done are not fixed on you as a person. They are not tattooed on you forever. They happened. They are part of your past, a part of your story, sure. Because of course you needed them to learn who you are and what you like and don't like and how you want to show up. So it's not about completely forgetting them necessarily or ignoring them or not taking accountability, but it's also not about taking them on as your perpetual identity, about who you are forever. And because you made that mistake then, you can't exist now comfortably as a person who is better because I did that then, so that's just who I am. It's you're not. You're not. Every day is a new version of you that shows up. You can decide differently every single day. And one different decision makes you a different person, right? And that's really as simple as it is. And I'm sure some people won't agree with this. Some people will see it differently. Fine. This is just what I use for me to not shame myself so much and make myself feel awful so that I can exist okay in life and feel some semblance of enjoyment in my experience, because that's the least we can do, right? Let ourselves feel okay and have some fun and not hate ourselves because of a mistake we made when we didn't know better, or because we're just human and we have to learn. When you start walking as a child, you're going to inevitably stumble. You're not going to just immediately start walking and be fine. But you're not going to look back at yourself and say, I was so stupid for stumbling. I was so stupid for tripping over and not knowing how to walk immediately. No, that's silly. But we think that about things we do that, require more of an emotional awareness. But again, you're learning, you're growing, and that's part of the process. So don't shame yourself. Don't guilt yourself for it. Accept it for what it was. You do have to accept it. You do have to let yourself feel the emotions that you felt and how you don't like it right now and it's uncomfortable and you wish you never did it, fine. But at the same time, it is also not your perpetual identity. It is not who you are forever because you did that thing that time. So I hope this was helpful. I hope it was comforting to anybody who struggles with this as well, because I know how difficult it can be. I really do. It's like you get trapped in this dark place because you can't let go of this thing you did one time. Or maybe you did it a few times, but it was in your past and you're different now. You can let go of it and you can move on from it. It's part of your story, sure, but it does not have to be part of who you are forever. So if you want to hear more about these topics, you can follow my other social media accounts. I have a Substack where I write about these things as well. And you can book a call with me if you want to talk about these things one-to-one and explore them with regards to your specific situation. But other than that, thank you for listening, and I'll be back again soon with another episode.